Hi, beautiful.
Hello, that light is awful bright.
I know I had to turn mine down. It was like, there we go. It was like almost like an interrogation light on me. All right.
Wow.
So, everybody, this is Texas Sweets. Again, there is going to be some things in her story that's going to be a little bit triggering. And if you are triggered for any reason, you can always step away. Reach out to somebody. Do not go through it alone. There's always options out there. Okay, guys? All right, let's get started. All right, Sweets. How are you? Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm
All
ready
right.
now. I don't know if I'll be ready in a minute, but I'm ready now.
Well, we're going to get through it, love. I thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with all of us. I really appreciate it, and thank you for trusting me to be the one to help you share it. So let's just start off. Tell us a little bit about where you're from.
So I grew up around Amarillo from the age of 6 on. Before 6, I was in DFW area of Texas. Born and raised Texas always.
Yeah.
I was born with 1 brother and 1 sister and ended up with 3 brothers and 3 sisters, or 2 sisters. So I don't have a lot of memories of my biological dad and my mom. The ones that I do have, 4 not to be that were dinner. And he pretty much just was around spontaneously, I guess you could say.
Right.
He so obviously he beat my mom for years and we didn't know it. And I don't really remember a whole lot of it other than that one night. My mom remarried I was 6. And that's when I gained 2 brothers and a sister. So we became the Brady Bunch. And that's when she moved us across state, up to Amarillo in the middle of nowhere. Me and my I call him my dad now, but he's my stepdad, obviously. We didn't hit it off really good because I always felt like loving him was betraying my dad, who at that point I still had this really high, he was on a pedestal for me, I guess. He could do no wrong. And me and my mom always argued about it, and I really never understood why until later in life, obviously. When he would get visitation, my mom would take us to my grandma's, and we would wait for hours or days for him to show up.
Oh.
And it would either be him, it would be my grandpa, my grandma, or his new girlfriend that we had never met.
Yeah.
And you never knew which one it was going to be. And then usually for whatever holiday it was, we'd see him for a short amount of time, and he'd hand a wad of cash to whoever was there to entertain us. And I always say I was the center of the Oreo that nobody wanted. My older brother was his only son. So, of course, he got everything and anything you ever asked for. And then my sister was the baby. So she could do no wrong. I learned later that obviously the reason he was in the lifestyle that he was in was he was a big time drug dealer and had a lot of covers for it. And when he stopped doing that is when his money kind of ran out. And that's kind of when I got the explanation of kind of how our life was and why it was so, he had other priorities. Yeah. Okay. And he showed up later in life when I was 23 and basically told me he was dying and that I needed to take care of him. And because I had never really felt like daddy's little girl, I guess, I felt like it was an obligation to have to take care of him. So I watched him die every day for 2 years. And one of the reasons I very rarely drink is because of that. From his drug use and his alcohol abuse is what killed him. Yeah. And that's something really hard to watch somebody go through. Even as shitty as a dad as he was, it was still hard to watch that,
Did you ever, during that 2-year period, I'm sorry to interrupt, during that 2-year period, did you ever get any type of closure from him, or did he ever show any type of remorse or acknowledgement?
That was probably the most abusive 2 years being around him. 1 minute, I was called all kinds of names under the book. The next minute was, oh, I love you. Will you please do this for me? But as soon as he got upset about something, it was back to calling me these names. And he died obviously before I put braces on. So he would just tell me, I'm glad your husband loves you, because I just don't see how somebody could love somebody with teeth like that. And just, I mean, it took everything my husband had not to say something to him. Just,
Right.
he did that out of respect for me, because it was my dad and he was dying. But, no, he would have me take him to different hospitals every night, thinking they were going to give him a new diagnosis. And then he would hire a babysitter to come watch my kids during the day the next day so I could sleep. And that was repetitive for months and months and months. And finally, me and Corby had talked, and he's like, baby, you've got to get a job. Like, you've got to get your brain somewhere other than this. So I took a job at a cell phone warehouse in Alliance. And I remember calling my uncle on that Friday saying, will you please just take him for the weekend so I can take the kids to the lake with my dad and my mom and just give me a break. And he was like, yeah, sure. Because when his ammonia levels would get high, like, he wasn't mentally there. And so he'd called me that Monday, and he was like, you know, baby, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm getting ready for work. And he's like, I really wish you could stay home with me. And I was like, well, I got to go to work. And he's like, well, my back's hurting. I'm going to go ahead and go to the ER. Just make sure you call me at lunch. Okay. So, you know, when you get started on a new job and you get the hang of it, like, you're just doing it. And so I realized that lunchtime had always to be passed. So you had to take your shoes off and everything, go out and come back in or whatever. So I got to the car and I had like 35 missed calls. And before I could listen to my voicemail, my husband's calling me. He's like, I need you to come home. And I was like, why? He's like, I need you to come home. How I got from there to the house, I don't know. The last thing he told me is your dad went into cardiac arrest. Oh, wow. And so when I got to him, obviously he got me to the hospital. My older brother had had nothing to do with my dad in 2 years. And they said he had cardiac arrest, but he could still hear me and he would still squeeze my hand and stuff like that. And he was on a liver transplant list, but we knew that that was a long shot. We held the plane for my sister to get on from Amarillo, but of course she was still using drugs at the time. So she knew he would know that, and so she wouldn't come. My older brother walks in and says, I'm the next of kin. I'm in charge. Take everything out, make him comfortable. Because he thought he had a life insurance policy on him. Wow. And so Corby leaned over to me. He said, he's waiting for you to tell him that you're going to take care of Katie. Yeah. And that's what I told him. I said, I will always take care of her. And he let go of my hand. And I watched him die. You would think knowing that it's coming makes it easier. It doesn't. No, it doesn't. And the type of person they are doesn't change how it affects your heart. I got to be, I guess, what I thought I wanted for those years, to be daddy's little girl for that amount of time. But the amount of suffering I did watching and the ups and downs with his mental state, some days I don't know that that was worth it. Right. I think it just made it a lot harder. Did you did you feel during that 2 years, because I know you said you guys were estranged for multiple years, did you have that connection with him? You know what I mean, like the daughter father connection? And was that something that you were, I'm sure as a child, that's more probably what I wanted. Yeah. And that's probably why I felt more obligation to do it, because most people were like, why would you do that? If he was, you know, he's not the one that raised you. He's not the one that taught you everything that you know. That was this dad. And I was like, but I was still from him. Like, he was still my dad. And I guess because I did have morals and values, that I felt like that was my responsibility as a child to take care of your parents when they're that sick or, you know, whatever. I didn't learn until about 3 years ago, and he died in 2006, that he actually poisoned my mom and dad's German Shepherd while he was at my house, just to be mean. And me and my bonus dad is the one that found him. And before he died, he admitted to them that he is the one that did that. And that was like our childhood family dog. Yeah. And so it was just one of his spells that he was mad that he just... Yeah. And my dad didn't even tell me that until like 3 years ago, that he's the one that killed him. Wow. And I was like, I don't understand. Right. That's, I don't think anybody can understand how someone could hurt someone like that. Did you ever get any type of like, maybe like a back history on him to kind of maybe get a little bit of, not understanding, but a little bit more clarity as to why he is the way that he is? So he was bitter that my mom left him, obviously. And I think the drugs did a toll on his brain.
Yes.
From what he told me and from other family members told me, when he originally started cooking and doing whatever, he didn't participate in it. He was just selling it or whatever. And then I believe he got involved in that. And because there would be nights that he'd be super paranoid. Like, my other dad has a cousin that was in the Secret Service, and he'd be like, oh, they're following me or they're doing this. Just because he knew that that person was related, he was thinking that. And so I think the drugs just took a toll on him to make him so paranoid that everybody was always doing something vicious or out to get him. And it didn't matter if you were his daughter. So Corby's parents, which is my husband, and him were all good friends, all of us growing up. When Corby would ask for my phone number, he would tell him, I'm not giving it to a punk like you. So when he found out that me and Corby were getting married, he basically threatened to kill both of us.
Oh, wow.
So he obviously was not at the wedding. And so my other dad didn't come to the wedding because if he came and the other one came and made a scene, then he would have felt obligated to handle it. So he just didn't come either. So I kind of got screwed in that aspect as well because he wanted to act crazy.
Right. I don't want to say anything bad because he passed, but it seems like he had a lot of demons.
He did.
And he also was very selfish.
Oh, absolutely. If it didn't benefit him, he wasn't trying to help anybody by no means. And my mom took the abuse for a long time. I want to say they were married for 10 years. I mean, and he'd be out getting drunk or whatever, and that's when she'd leave food in the microwave. And that's what the night he woke me up beating her with a belt was over, is the chicken wasn't cooked to his spec or whatever. And so she endured a lot.
Yeah.
You would have thought I would have learned some things from her. However, I feel like sometimes I have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
And I definitely did. So my mom remarried when I was 6, moved to Amarillo. And of course, our family got a lot bigger. And a family member was sexually assaulting me from the time I was 9 to 11. And we had moved from Borger to Fritch, and our parents did this whole, y'all can come in here and, you know, if y'all have done anything that we need to know about, you can tell us, and it'll be like a clean slate thing. Because, you know, we were always sneaking snacks. Like my mom would count snacks and put them in like a tote because we were always taking snacks. And she looked right at me like, has anybody ever? So that tells me now, not when I was 12, obviously, that she's seen signs, that she noticed something. And I was like, well, I'm not saying anything in front of, you know, my 5 siblings.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they pulled me to the side, and I told her, yeah, like, it's been going on for a while, you know. And she said, okay, well, I'll talk to you about it later. And the last thing I was told was it was to be dropped and never mentioned again. Ever. And I struggled with that for about 12 years because being that young, and he was, I want to say he was 18 when I was 11. So you knew better.
Yeah.
After me and Corby got married, and he knew I still struggled with it because I was like, I was young. Like, did I cause it? Was it my fault? Did I enjoy it? Like, did I ask for it? You know, all these different things that my mind as a child could not process.
Right.
And I went back to them when I was 21 and told them how I felt about it. Corby went with me, and that they let me carry that alone for 12 years.
Right.
And that if anybody ever touched one of my children, I wouldn't care who it was or where they were related, that it would be handled. And I firmly believe that parents do the best they can with what they know at that time. And I forgave him because I needed to for myself. And I forgave my parents a long time ago because with 6 kids and a blended family, like, I know it was hard for them in a lot of ways. But I promised that my kids would never go through that. They would never feel like they weren't able to tell their story, or they weren't able to have somebody believe them, or to have to carry that for that amount of time. So between that time and the time I turned 14, everything was pretty normal, you know, middle school, different things. Me and my sisters were never really close. They liked to use you to get what they want. And then if they get in trouble, they're going to take you down. Normal civil rivalry.
Right.
Until I got my older sister had to sneak out of the house. And I got raped that night. And I had bruises all down my back. And when I told my parents and they called the cops, she refused to say anything because she didn't want to be in trouble for sneaking out. And the cop told them that since we lived in such a small town and I had 5 siblings, that it would ruin their lives if they pressed charges.
Oh my God.
So they did not. They didn't do anything. So I feel therapy. I recommend therapy to everybody. I don't care if your life is good, bad. Therapy is great because it gives you coping mechanisms to deal with life's curveballs. They taught me at a young age that I didn't matter, that I wasn't enough. And that's probably why I still in my 40s, I still struggle with that.
Yeah.
Because I cannot imagine doing that to my kids.
Right.
Or to allow that to happen and then do nothing and they get to walk with no consequences, you know. So after that, I tried to kill myself. I took a bottle of hot pink Bayer Select aspirin. My sister watched me and said nothing. I woke up and I was vomiting and my mom was cleaning it up and I went back to sleep. And the next morning I woke up and I was still vomiting and I was hurting so bad. And she tried to give me some Tylenol. I was like, I can't take it. I've taken too many. And she called poison control and they said, you better get her to the ER. Like her organs are shutting down.
Yeah.
I remember getting yelled at for 10 minutes before getting in the car. And she took me in my bra and panties and a robe and a trash can. And they stuck me with so many needles. Because at that time they couldn't pump my stomach. It had already been in there for so long.
Yeah.
So they moved me to ICU and told me I had to drink this horrible stuff called Mucomist that, stinks so bad they tape it shut and it tastes so bad they dilute it with Coke.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom and them got up to leave and I was like, where are y'all going? Well, this was self-inflicted. So you can stay here by yourself.
Oh my God.
Okay. And I did. Spent 4 days in ICU. She came up during the day and was not allowed to stay with me at night. Of course, they recommended I go to therapy. And I got to go to 1 therapy session. And then I got told it wasn't worth the money. And then I got grounded for 6 months for trying to die. And I often think back, if I would have gotten therapy then, how it could have helped me deal with what was still to come.
Right.
And not to mention what I had already been through. But also, I always wondered why God let me make it. Why he didn't take me then. Mm-hmm. And I didn't learn that until about 6 years ago. I used to tell my mom all the time I hated my heart because it always got me hurt and it always got me in trouble, And I learned as I got older that I just hadn't grown into it yet. I just wasn't prepared for it yet. And that's why I got hurt. At 15 is obviously when I learned the story about my dad. At 16, I got kicked out of the house. My brother kind of helped me out with that. There's a thing in the Panhandle called the XIT rodeo. Mm-hmm. And my parents were out of town and I had been asking if I could go because there wasn't much to do in Fritch, America. I mean, you could go mudding. You were either getting drunk or having sex. Yeah. We were river rats. Like we played in the mud. And XIT rodeo was one of the things that me and the 15 older brothers that I hung out with did. And my brother's like, just go. They're tired of dealing with you anyways. Okay. So I went till the next day I got home and they kept my car and kicked me out. Sent me south to my biological dad, who up and left in like 2 weeks of me being there. So I was with some cousin. Um, from 17 to 18, I was in a very abusive relationship. Um, I cannot tell you the amount of bruises that I had. There was one time I came home from work and I lived across the street from a nursing home, and he had ran my head into the tree and I was bleeding. And I guess somebody called the cops because when they kicked in my door, he had me sitting Indian style in the living room. And I remember that they were blocking my number so he couldn't call me.
Mm-hmm.
And his mom went and bailed him out that night. And I got it 10 times worse.
Yeah.
The last time he had held me down and had a syringe full of dope to my arm, I knew that if I didn't get away from this man, he was going to kill me.
Yeah.
And so I called my biological dad at the time and said, I need you to come help me. I need to go. I need to pack. I need to get out of here. He's going to kill me. And so I did. And I happened to run into Corby 2 weekends after that, I guess. And we hadn't seen each other in about 4 years. And he's like, I've been waiting on you. Because we made this promise like when I was 13 and he was 17 that, you know, we were going to grow up and get married and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what do you mean you've been waiting on me? He's like, I've been waiting on you to graduate. Like that was the deal, you know?
Yeah.
And most people thought that we were crazy, that we dated for a month and then got married. We're here 23 years later and it's been some blood, sweat, and tears, but nothing in life worth having comes easy. Right. And we've been through a lot of things that should have destroyed us. And at one point or the other, one of us was completely fighting. Mm-hmm. And that man has healed a lot that he didn't do. I know that when we first got together, if, you know, when somebody goes to walk away and you go to grab their arm, you know, not like in a mean way, but to pull them back to you. Yeah. I remember him doing that, and it would be an immediate flashback.
Oh, yeah, that's a trigger.
Yeah, and it took a very, very long time for him to be able to do certain things or certain maneuvers that didn't trigger me like that.
Right.
So we got married at 19. 23, my dad died in 2006. At that point, I started taking care of both of my granddads, my mom's dad and my dad's dad. They were both very sick. And I had to talk my grandpa into moving off the property that my dad had because my brother and my mom wanted to sell it. Mm-hmm. He owed my mom about $30,000 in back child support, and my brother was just greedy. So I had to talk him into moving into an apartment, which was safer for him anyways. And I took care of both of them. I applied for nursing school in 2010. My grandpa got really sick and got put in a nursing home earlier that year. And I remember him calling me, telling me he needed to know if I got in. And I was like, I won't know for like another month. And they were telling me how bad he was. And it was about 3 weeks later, he called me again. Like he did a 380, like was perfectly fine the next day. And he called me a little later and he's like, I need to know. I really need to know. Like, I don't know how much longer I have and I need to know. So my mom and all these people were calling the nursing programs, like, you know, her grandpa's dying, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what they did, but somehow the next day we got the letter. And so I took him the letter and he told me how much he loved me and how good of a nurse I was going to be. And I needed to go home and get some rest. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the next morning I got the call that I needed to get up there because he wasn't going to make it through the day. Mm-hmm. So he held on long enough to know that I got in. So that was May of 2010. 2 months later, my mom's dad dies. 2 months later, my brother dies. Oh. My oldest brother. Yeah. He was a severe diabetic. And the hard part with him is I had a dream the night before because we had picked him up from the ER because his blood sugar was super high and a highway patrol made him go to the ER. I had already taken sleeping pills that night because I had school the next day. So Corby was driving and he insisted that he be dropped off at his house because he loved his bed. And so we did. And the next day we were doing pumpkins or something with all the niece and nephews. And I woke up that night about 2 a.m. and I was like, Corby, we have to go check on Kenneth. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. He's like, babe, he's fine. We'll go check on him in the morning. 8 o'clock that morning, my sister-in-law calls me screaming. And I mean, it was literally every single thing that I dreamed about.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I had a lot of guilt for a long time because I didn't get up and I didn't go. He was 31. And my whole family went off the deep end.
Yeah.
They were all obliterated at his funeral, drinking tequila out of the back of their car. I had to write his eulogy. Both of my sisters relapsed. Both of my brothers relapsed. My mom got on drugs at 52, and my dad started drinking all the time. Not that I ever did the drugs, but I feel like nursing school saved me.
Right.
The last thing my brother had told me is I would never finish. And so I used that as motivation the whole entire time. Like, he may not be here, but I'm going to finish.
Yeah.
And I kind of prided myself out of 6 kids that I didn't ever take the drug path and I didn't ever go to jail because I seen what our parents did. You know, I seen what I didn't want in life. I didn't want for my kids. I wanted them to have something different. So that was 2010.
I do have a quick question. You experienced a lot of childhood trauma, and there was a lot of stemming from your parents and how they handled things. And was this something that was more impacted towards you, or was there just trauma within the whole unit? Like your brothers and sisters had their own issues and you had what was happening to you, or was it just kind of...
I can't honestly think of anything with Kenneth. He was my dad's only son, and then he was the oldest of all the boys, but nothing really ever I mean, he was a diabetic at 16, kind of a crappy hand handed to him. Brian had some mental health issues that, you know, mental health was not a big thing back then like it is now. And I feel like if we would know now back then, it could have been different for him. He spent most of my adult life in prison, currently still there. My younger sister had some traumas, but I want to say hers was after she got out of the house. She got pregnant at 16. Later on was raped, and that's when she turned to drugs. I'm tired.
Right.
And I didn't understand that because, like, you're a mom for life kind of thing. You know, you have this baby, like, they're still my babies. And when they're grown, like, they're still my babies.
Right.
But as far as the family related, as far as that kind of stuff, I feel like that was probably, I just got the shitty hand.
Right. Did your brothers and sisters know about what was happening to you?
They didn't know at the time, but they found out later. The person is still around. I still have to see them on occasion because I refuse to let them have that power to determine where and when I can go somewhere. And like I said, I forgave that a long time ago because I needed to for me to make sure that it wasn't going to change me into somebody that I didn't want to be.
Right.
I've often wondered, had it been one of them that it happened to instead of me, if the reaction or consequences would have been different. I feel like it probably would have been, but obviously that's just my own opinion.
Yeah.
I don't think they knew when it was happening. And if they did, they never said anything at all. But we weren't, like I said, we weren't really that close. Like I have friends that are closer than my sisters ever were.
Yeah.
When you don't have that trust or that bond, and it's constantly, we're going to pin mom and dad against you to get their favor or whatever, you don't have that relationship with them. And it's not because I've never tried. I have, even as a grown adult, I've tried. But it always tends to backfire in my face.
It's like a rivalry.
Some point you just stop trying.
Right.
And, you know, you have to do for you. I get a lot of resentment because, like if my younger daughter says something about, well, my mom has never done drugs or my mom had never been to prison, they take offense to it and be like, oh yeah, we forgot your mom's perfect. And that's not what she was trying to say. She was just trying to say like, you know, my mom made better decisions or,
Mhm.
you know, whatever.
There's nothing wrong with that. I
No,
don't think that because of their bad decisions that you have to be less proud of your triumphs. You know what I mean? I saw this one saying, it was in the chat, and it's just like it's now it's going to be one thing that's going to be permanently indented into my brain. It says just because someone has a title to you does not mean they're entitled to you.
absolutely.
And
You know,
I
and
saw
it's
that, I was
taken
like,
me a long term to learn that.
yeah,
Long time to learn that.
right.
Um, so I went to work in prison after I graduated nursing school. I just recently learned that explains why I thrive in fast-paced nursing positions, high
Hmm.
stress. But I didn't know that working in prison was probably going to exacerbate all of those um,
Yeah.
symptoms and stuff. And I had to be a really mean person working in prison. You had to show no fear.
Hmm.
Um, and I did it. And but when it gets to where I can't separate who I am walking on the inside and who I am coming out, it's
Hmm.
time to walk away.
Right.
Um, and so in the process of working there, me and my little brother didn't talk a whole lot because he sheltered our family from his lifestyle
Hmm.
because he felt like my dad disapproved of him being gay. We loved him either way, you know, and the kids adored him all the time. But I think he did it out of trying to do it out of respect for my dad, that he kept that lifestyle away. And in the process, we kind of got cheated
Hmm.
from a lot of his life. But him and my older sister were like fire and gasoline. They were a horrible combination. And she ended up going to prison. And he didn't know what he was doing. And he overdosed on heroin. And I actually got the call at work one day and they had to escort me out because obviously you can't be a hot mess like that in
Hmm.
prison.
Right.
At the same time, my mom had an episode where she took a bottle of Xanax and ran out into a rainstorm. And you know those old campers you can put on like trucks and you can take them off and sit them on the ground or whatever?
Oh, like a little pop up?
No, it's one like you put on the tailgate or on the bed and you
Oh,
can
yeah, yeah,
take it
yeah.
off.
Hmm.
So I guess there was one on the ground and she had crawled up underneath there and we'd been trying to find her, and Corby and my sister went out the next day one more time and they happened to find her. So she spent a week in ICU, and while she was in ICU, we got notified that Darren died. So when she came home, that was what we had to tell her. And then obviously Carol's writing another eulogy for her brother.
Yeah.
Um, they handled that funeral a lot different than they did the first one. Um, so out of 6 of us, there's 4 of us left. Um, I quit working in prison. We moved. I had had enough. Um, I didn't like the person that I had to become, and it
Hmm.
got harder to separate from inside and outside. And so we had moved back from Amarillo down to the DFW area about that time, about 2016
Hmm.
beginning, I guess. Everything had been fine. Um, New Year's Eve, we were at Gun Barrel City at a friend's lake house. And Kinsey and Caitlyn were supposed to come down and meet us there.
Just a
Caitlyn,
trigger warning. I'm sorry, just a trigger warning for
yeah,
everybody. This part might be a little bit hard to hear. So this is definitely a trigger warning if you need to step away. Now would be the time to step away. Remember, there are resources out there if you are triggered. Feel free to ask. My mods are in here giving resources as well. I'm sorry, go ahead. Sweets.
um, they were supposed to come down and spend New Year's Eve with us at Gun Barrel City. And Caitlyn had called and said she wasn't feeling good and that she was going to stay home. So Kinsey decided that she was going to stay and hang out with some friends. instead of coming down too. Carmen, the baby, decides to roll a golf cart that night, and it landed on her best friend's foot. So me and Carmen and Kendra and us were at the ER, and because we obviously thought her foot was broke because it was purple and blue. We had just got home about 3 a.m. and Corby's phone is blowing up, and he's not answering because he doesn't know that number. And I'm like, it's 3 a.m. If somebody's blowing your phone up at 3 a.m., like, it's important. Like, answer the phone. And all I hear is somebody screaming, saying she's not breathing. I immediately grab my bra, go tell my friend. I was like, look, we're headed to DFW. I'm leaving my kids here. Caitlyn had hung herself. She'd called her boyfriend, who apparently had been mentally and physically abusing her for months, and nobody knew. She made a video trying to say goodbye, but you could tell that she was struggling with it, like that she didn't want to do that. So she called him, and she told him what she was going to do and where she was at, and that the door was unlocked, phones were off, security alarms were off. For the 40 minutes that he was on the phone with her, the last 20, she didn't say a word. Nothing. He never stopped. He never called 911. He never hung up. 40 minutes it took him to get there. To make another, I'd say minimum 10, 15 minutes to find her. They did get a heart rate back, and they took her to the hospital. That was the longest hour-and-a-half drive I have ever made in my life. Not knowing anything. We got there, and of course nurses always try to be respectful, and they don't want to just bluntly tell you she's not coming out of this. And I know that. I'm that same nurse. So I pulled the nurse aside and I said, I'm going to need you to look at me like I'm taking over, and you're going to give me a report. And I need to know. And at that point I knew she wasn't coming home. We walked in, and she had these crocodile tears coming down her face. And Corby looked at the nurse and said, that's not a normal reaction. She said, well, sometimes their eyes can water, da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, that's not watering. Those are big tears. And we went home. They told us that we had plenty of time. We was going to go home, take a shower, kind of recoup, come back. We hadn't been home 30 minutes, and we got a call to get back to the hospital. The vent had only been helping her breathe at that point. When we got the call, the vent had completely taken over. On the way, there was a huge storm in Fort Worth, and like blowing semis off the road, huge storm. And I had messaged all the family to let them know where we were going and what we were doing. And my brother-in-law sent me the song Eye of the Storm by Ryan Stevenson, which I had sent to him previously when he was going through something. And before I could ever play it, it came on the radio. My husband pulled that car over and got on his knees in the middle of that street in that storm. And that is the first time I've ever seen that man on his knees. And I just sat there and listened to that song. He got back in the car, and we got back to the hospital, and they said, we've got some brain dye coming from Dallas, that they'll do a brain dye test on her because she was a donor. That's what she wanted. And he said, depending on how that results come back, will determine if she's declared brain dead or if there's another option that we can take. She had what's called an anoxic brain injury, and the swelling on her brain wasn't going down. And so they came in, they did the brain dye test, and they declared her brain dead. And Corby looked at me with the most peace I'd ever seen, and he said, I knew she was going to walk out of here. She just didn't walk out of here with us. And he said, my baby's home. So of course we stayed for another 36 hours because I wasn't leaving her until they took her for that purpose. She did donate both of her kidneys. She saved a lady in Galveston area. She had two kids. She'd been on dialysis since she was 32. She was 36. She lost her husband 8 days prior to her getting Caitlyn's kidney that saved her life. We actually got a letter from her. The other man that she saved, I don't know anything about him. So after she died, obviously we wanted to do something in her honor. And so we just kind of threw something together. She loved all the charity work of like doing for the homeless or this, that, and another. And so we did that for her birthday. And I was like, I want to do something bigger. Well, for the next year, I focused on Corby's pain and my kids' pains. And I ignored mine. And it took about a year to catch up with me. But my husband was working out of town for 3 weeks at a time. And my mom would tell me I need meds. And my dad would be like, no, you don't. Why do you need meds? Kind of making me feel like I was defective if I needed meds. So I ignored it until I could be at home. And one thought would send me into a panic attack in the floor until I couldn't breathe. And one day I left work and I called a friend of mine and I said, I have some questions. I have a nursing friend that I have some questions. And it took about 2 seconds for her to realize that it was me. I said, I feel like I'm standing on a bridge and I have the weight of the world on my shoulders and my knees are buckling. And what's so weird about that is I didn't want to die. Mm-hmm. Death was my trigger. I said, but my head's really foggy and it's time I need to do something. So I went and checked myself in. My husband didn't even know until afterwards. And for 8 days, that psychiatrist looked at me and he said, you're not crazy. He said, but the amount of trauma that you have that you've never dealt with is astronomical. And he said, you probably needed a vacation that focused on you and not you trying to save everybody else. A lot of people say I have a save the world complex and that they're going to teach me not to do that. My husband always tells them good luck. He's been trying for a long time. So after I came out, there was 2 scriptures that really, really saved me. I went and talked to my preacher, and then when I got out, and he said, I need you to read 2 Corinthians 12. And then my preacher's wife told me, I need you to find the book, It's Okay Not to Be Okay by Sheila Walsh. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, like I'm on it. And I went and found that book, and I started reading it, and 4 pages in, it has 2 Corinthians 12:9. Because one thing I couldn't understand, and I tell my dad and my mom, is like, the more I pray, the worse it gets. Like, I don't understand why this won't go away. And the verse says, and Paul asked God to take it 3 times. And God said, no, for my grace is sufficient, for my power is best in your weakness. And I lost it. It was like one of those aha moments that I realized, like, I'm not using this for what I need to be using it for. And so we had started the Speak Life Adventure and did a benefit each year that we would get all the stuff for the blessing bags, and we'd go pass them out in Caitlyn's honor, and we'd put her story in there in every bag that went out. And obviously COVID happened, and that put a big damper on being able to do the things that we wanted to do or cook for them. And the Speak Life Adventure came from the verse Proverbs 18:21, which is, there's power of life and death in the tongue. And I firmly believe that you are the only person that will speak as much life over your life that you need. Other people can do it for you, but it's not like it's going to be if you do it. So I got on TikTok because everybody got on TikTok during COVID because we had nothing else to do.
And that was bored.
Yeah. And I wanted to do something that brought awareness to it, because I dove into every study, every statistic, anything and everything that I could learn, because she didn't have any. She never showed any signs. She was always the life of the party, the funny one, the laughing one. And for years, I asked myself, like, what did I miss? What did I not see? And the one thing I struggled with is when somebody passes, people want to be courteous and say, if you need anything, let me know. And one day somebody texted that to me, and I totally lost it on my husband, because I'm like, can they bring her back? Can they prevent it from happening? Can they give us our daughter back? Because if they can't, there's nothing they can do for me. And I know that sounds super ungrateful, but I was so tired of hearing,
Right.
if there's anything I can do, let me know. And that's why I tell people now, like, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to try to fix them.
Yes.
Tell them you'll sit with them. Tell them you'll let them scream, and you'll let them yell, and you'll listen and just sit. Like, you don't got to fix me.
Right.
Just hear me. Just see me. That's what I need. I don't need you to fix me. I don't need you to try to take my pain. I just need you to hear and see me.
Yeah.
And that taught me in that I needed to do that for others. That I don't need to fix them, but I can see them and I can hear them and I can let them scream and vent. And that's, you can ask any of my friends. Most of the time I tell them, if you need to call and scream, just tell me. Like, let me move the phone away from my ear so that you're not screaming in it, but that you can scream. And so then the more we were on TikTok, and a lot of us would scroll at night, and, you know, we'd see these people crying and sad. And I was like, I want to do something. Like, I want to do something to help these people. And this is where the crown boxes came from. And the original plan was just, if we scrolled and we seen somebody that needed it, just send them one. And like, the plan was like 1 or 2 a week, you know? Well, obviously this app has made it to where people aren't just going to give random strangers their addresses.
Right.
They're just not. So we had to come up with a different way about doing it. And so I was like, okay, well, let's do it by nomination. Because if they do it by nomination and Danny nominates this person, then she's validating her story and she's speaking to her character because she's taken the time to nominate her. Never did I think in a million years that A, it would get any hate, or B, that we would have the amount of nominations that we have. And all of that was going pretty good till Christmas. Most know that I went to Nashville for the week of New Year's. That's a hard week. Caitlyn's birthday week and that week is probably the hardest too. People need to realize that when you lose somebody, it's not just that part that you're losing. Like, she's missed my grandkids being born. She's missed my daughter getting married. She's missed my other daughter graduating high school. Like, there's forever going to be something that she's not here for.
There will forever be that moment that you stop and you think, I wish Caitlyn was here.
Yeah. Like, what would her face say? What would she be laughing about? Or, you know, how would she act with her nephews? And all these things that you're never going to get these answers to, you know, like, I had to learn that all my questions that I had, when I get to heaven and get the questions answered, I'm not going to care. Those answers aren't going to matter at that point, you know. She gave me a voice that I've had for 42 years that I didn't use. And so at Christmas, one of our really good friends was in a really horrific accident. And I walked in the room and she's like, Mom, it's Dad. And the look on her face told me it was really bad. And then when I heard his voice, like, my heart stopped. And of course, I tried to dart to the bathroom unknowingly. KP makes eye contact with me. Tasha's already texting Jen. It was bad. And then having to go home the next day after leaving your people, like, those emotions are really, really, really high. And I thought, it's just a trigger, like, it'll be fine, you know? And then I kind of started spiraling. And I didn't understand how one trigger so severe could trigger everything else. And I know that my friends knew it bad, and I knew my husband knew it was bad. But I called him one night when I left work, and I said, I need a reason to stay. And he's like, what do you mean? You need a reason to stay at work? I said, no, I need a reason to stay here because I don't have any anymore. And I think at that point he realized that he was terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I love you and I will do anything for you. But he doesn't have it, so he doesn't understand it. And he's like, tell me where you want to go. I think you need to be with somebody that knows, because he knew I didn't want to go check myself in. I didn't want to go back on meds. I worked really hard to get off all of those. And he made me promise I'd call a therapist. And I did. And she talked to me for about 30 minutes. And she said, your coping mechanism is taking care of everybody but yourself.
Yep.
You will suppress every bit of trauma you have to make sure somebody else is good. Yep. She said that trigger being that severe just dumped 42 years of trauma on top of you. And you were in no shape or form prepared for that. Might have had something to do with, I probably should have got my pellets a month sooner. Mm-hmm. Little details, check your hormones. But you know, it's sad that it took losing my daughter for me to realize that I had a voice my whole life and I lived for everybody else's approval. Not what made me happy, but what would make my parents happy or my siblings happy, or it wasn't about
finding happiness in other people's validations.
Yeah. Only if they approved of it would I do it. Or if I didn't think my dad would like it, then I wouldn't do it. Or if they were going to be upset with me, I won't do it. And I'm 42. If you don't like me, bye. Right. And that's with your family or not. Because at this point, I just don't give a shit anymore. Like, I'm going to live for me and what makes me happy. And I hope that my voice with Caitlyn's story will help somebody make a different choice than she did. That somebody else's family won't ever have to deal with that. That's, there is no timeline on grief.
There is not.
That is your own. And statistically speaking, if somebody dies unexpectedly, the grief process statistically is 5 to 7 years. If you know it's coming, they say it's 5 years. For suicide, there's no timeline.
Right.
And I think that comes with the questions that you ask, like, you know, what did I miss? What did I not see? What could I have done different?
It's always the whys.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know that if she would have made it, she would have definitely used her story to help somebody. And maybe that's why God didn't take me. Someday I'll know.
I'm glad you were still here, ma'am.
I appreciate that.
You were a beautiful woman, man. Inside and out. I've heard your story, and I've heard little parts, but never, you know, like this. And I've seen you come into a room and you bring a sense of calm and you bring a sense of caring.
They say that about my voice, but I don't see it. But
it's everything, man. It's your voice, it's your demeanor. You come in. I've seen you go into a live where it was chaotic and hectic, and you brought a calm energy. You brought peace.
I try.
You definitely
sometimes
do.
It's a little harder than others, and
yep.
and sometimes it's really hard subjects, and sometimes I don't feel like I always have the right words. T. Bailey messaged me the other night. It was like, I need you to get in this live. Never seen the girl before in my life.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. God, you better give me some words because I don't know what I'm about to say. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it works. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, not everything that works for me is going to work for you. Right. Not everything that works for you is going to work for the next person. And I try to make sure I tell people that, hey, this is a range of stuff you can try. Just because this worked for me doesn't mean it will for you, but you can try this or this, you know, and give several options of different things. I think the main important thing is for people to learn how to talk yourself down out of anxiety. Mm-hmm. That's been one of the biggest things for me. Is I was waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks, like clawing my face till it was bleeding. And my husband would wake up before I would. And then they would get so bad that I would literally feel like I was having a heart attack. And all I could think of is my husband's fixing to sit here and watch me die. You know, which obviously then made it
And it
worse
gives you more
because
anxiety.
I'm worried
Right.
about dying in front of my husband,
Yeah.
and so there's an app called 478 that'll teach you like to breathe in for a certain amount of time, and then you hold it for a certain amount of time, and then you blow it out for a certain amount of time, and it distracts your brain from what you're thinking of, and it kind of redirects your thoughts to where you can, kind of calm yourself down. And that really helped me a lot until I just kind of focused on my breathing, like breathe in my mouth and out my nose kind of does the same thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so even working in nursing, there's still things that trigger me. I've had to respond to suicide attempts and different things. And I was worried about that afterwards. Fight or flight kicks in. I do what I need to do as a nurse at that point. But then it's the come down. And I don't think people realize that it's a mental drainage when you're triggered, that when you come off of that trigger, you're mentally and physically exhausted.
Oh,
Like you feel like you've
yes.
been ran through the ringer, and they're like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, I just need a day. Like, give me a
Right.
day. Like you're on empty. Like you have nothing else to give at that point because you went straight into fight or flight. Um, and then of course for me, it's the thought of what if I can't save this one, and I think that's with every healthcare worker probably is their family will experience what I did.
Yes.
You should never have to bury your babies for any reason, ever.
No, we were talking about it, when I called you today, and man, like, I couldn't imagine. I have no, I can't sit there and say that I know how you feel. I just know that, when you're telling me your story, all I wanted to do was grab my baby, because I just couldn't, whew, I couldn't imagine.
It does. It makes you more grateful for the small things.
Yeah.
There's days that I'm sure that people's got little kids, like you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so done with this kid today. But then you look back and you're like, I miss those times. Or I wish I'd have had a little bit more of that time. 18 years is a drop in the bucket in the amount of most people live to 75 at minimum, and we got her for 18.
I think, when you lose somebody, it puts so much in perspective for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you think different. I mean, it forever changes you in so many different ways. And, when you're talking about losing your daughter and how it changed you and how it's made you use your voice and started to focus on yourself and make yourself happy. Like, you have to make yourself happy. You can't make others happy if you're not happy yourself.
Right.
And, I experienced, a lot of people know my daughter's father passed away, and it made me realize, the arguments, the being stubborn, the bitterness is just not worth it. It's not worth it because at any moment they could just.
If it's not going to matter in 3 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 months, or 3 years, let it go.
Right.
It's and there's things that people get upset about, me included, and then you sit back and you're like, why did that really upset me? And it's trivial things a lot of times, but at the same time, your feelings are valid, and at some point you have to set boundaries, whether you're in your 40s or not. Like, so it's kind of a balance, like. Yes. I want my boundaries respected, but at the same time, I'm not going to hold a grudge over something minimal that I could regret tomorrow if something happened, and everybody walks out your door every morning, everybody goes to work or school or to pick up kids. Like, anything can happen in the blink of an eye, and I think that our brains are just so busy a lot of the times focused on, I got to do this today, I got to do this today, or I got to do this today, that we forget the small things. The small things.
Yeah, definitely. Just the littlest things that we talked about a little bit was, moments, big moments, not even big moments, small moments. Like when you're just sitting there and you'd be sitting in the chair and the kids could be running around playing and laughing. And just that moment you think, God, I wish I wish they were here right now. They'd be running around chasing them, or they'd be sitting next to me laughing, or, I wonder.
I
You always
always wonder
wonder
what
what
my
it.
little brother
You
would
always
have done
wonder
with
what
my
it could have been.
grandkids.
Yeah, you always have that
All the
what
kids
if.
loved him. Yeah.
Yeah,
They always attracted him like magnets. He was the fun uncle.
yeah,
But yeah, life's too
man.
short.
Yeah, if you have God, people close to you, man, hug them tight, love on them a little extra, and don't ever take for granted the little things, man. The little things matter the most. Experiences over monetary things. Instead of buying someone a gift, man, just give them your time.
Yeah. And I can't speak there. My love language is gifting, and I happen to like doing surprises. So I'll give you my
But
time
it's
and the gift.
Yeah, it's time and the gift. There's something behind it. But so you were talking about with your dad, whenever he would finally come around and he would just throw money at whoever and have them entertain you. And I think you would have so much preferred your dad doing something with you, even if it was sitting down with a coloring book and just listening to you for 5 minutes. It didn't have to be some grand
Yeah.
gesture.
I
It
don't
just
think
needed to
I
be
ever had
something,
that with him.
right?
Ever. Mm-mm.
Right. And that's something that I learned along the way, with being a mom. I thought my kids had to have the best everything and the best clothes and the nicest thing and, all these gifts under the tree for Christmas. And I worked so much to make sure that they had everything, but I was missing out on so much time with my daughter that I'll never get back. I'll never get that time back. But I could bring my daughter in the room right now and I could ask her, hey, what'd you get for your fifth Christmas? She won't be able to tell me.
Nope.
She doesn't have it anymore. Those things don't matter, but she can tell me about the time that I went outside and I threw the ball with her in the front yard. I got off work and I was tired, but I went out there and I threw the ball with her.
My sister-in-law, because of that reason right there, instead of buying them presents, they do trips. Went to this state park or they went to Disney World or whatever. It didn't even have to be something big and extravagant, but she's like, I want my kids to have the memories